My name is Dolly, and I'm 54 years old. I thought I knew my son better than anyone in this world. After all, I raised him alone for 30 years, sacrificing everything so he could have a good life. On his 30th birthday, I wanted to surprise him. I hid in the back seat of his car with an expensive gift I had saved months to buy. Then he got in with someone, and that someone said words that shattered my entire world. Before I tell you who was sitting in that front seat and what they were planning to do to me, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that subscribe button because this story has a twist you will never see coming. Now, let me take you back to how a mother's love turned into a mother's nightmare. I was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. My father worked as a carpenter building furniture for families across the county. My mother was a nurse at the local hospital working night shifts, so she could be home when I got back from school. We were not rich, but we had enough. More importantly, we had love. After finishing high school, I got a job at a small bank downtown. It was nothing fancy, just a teller position. But I was proud to earn my own money. That was where I met Harold. He came in one Tuesday afternoon to open a savings account. He was tall with kind brown eyes and a smile that made my heart skip. He worked as a construction engineer for a company that built bridges and highways. We started talking then, dating, then falling in love. At 23, I married Harold in a small ceremony at our church. My mother cried happy tears. My father shook Harold's hand and told him to take good care of his little girl. We bought a tiny house on Maple Street with a white picket fence and a backyard just big enough for a swing set. Life felt like a dream. 2 years later, I gave birth to our son. We named him Brandon. He had his father's eyes and my stubbornness. From the moment I held him in my arms, I knew I would do anything for this child. Harold felt the same way. He worked extra hours so I could stay home with Brandon during his first years. We were a team, a family, a unit that nothing could break. But life had other plans. When Brandon was 4 years old, Harold went to work on a construction site in Memphis. It was supposed to be a routine job, just inspecting some structural work on a new overpass. I remember kissing him goodbye that morning. He promised to bring back barbecue from that famous place Brandon loved. That was the last time I saw my husband alive. The accident happened around noon. A crane malfunctioned. Harold was standing in the wrong place at the wrong moment. They told me he did not suffer, that it was instant. I do not know if that was true, or if they just said it to comfort me. Either way, my world collapsed. I was 29 years old, a widow with a 4-year-old son, a mortgage I could barely afford, and a heart that felt like it would never beat properly again. The life insurance payout was modest. It covered the funeral and about 6 months of bills. After that, I was on my own. I went back to work at the bank, but one job was not enough. I picked up evening shifts at a bakery 3 blocks from our house. Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, watched Brandon for free because she said it gave her purpose. I would come home at 10 at night, exhausted, smelling like flour and frosting, and find my son asleep on Mrs. Patterson's couch with cartoons still playing on the television. Every penny I earned went toward Brandon. I learned to sew so I could make his clothes instead of buying them. I cut coupons like my life depended on it. Birthday parties were homemade cakes and backyard games with neighborhood kids. Christmas presents were practical things wrapped in newspaper comics to make them look festive. I never bought myself anything new. My wardrobe stayed frozen in time, the same dresses and shoes from my 20s worn until they fell apart. But Brandon never knew how hard things were. I made sure of that. To him, our little house was a castle, and I was both king and queen, holding everything together with invisible strings. Men asked me out over the years. Some were kind, some were handsome, some were both. A manager at the bank named Robert pursued me for almost 2 years. He was patient and gentle, and he adored Brandon. But every time I thought about letting someone new into our lives, I hesitated. What if it did not work out? What if Brandon got attached and then lost another father figure? I could not risk breaking his heart again. So I stayed single. I told myself it was better this way. Just me and my boy against the world. Brandon grew up to be everything I hoped for. He was smart, curious, and kind to others. Teachers praised him. Other parents told me how polite he was. Every night before bed, no matter how old he got, he would say the same three words: I love you, Mom. And I would say them back. Every single night. He graduated high school, near the top of his class. I sat in the auditorium, tears streaming down my face, watching him walk across that stage. All those years of sacrifice, all those double shifts, and homemade everything, it was worth it. My son was going places. For college, I used every dollar I had saved. The account I had been feeding since Brandon was a baby. The one I promised myself I would never touch for anything else. It was enough for 4 years at a state university, if he lived frugally. He studied business administration and graduated with honors. I drove 3 hours to attend his graduation, wearing a dress I had bought second-hand, but altered to look almost new. Brandon got a job at a marketing firm in Nashville. A real career with a salary and benefits, and a future. He called me every single day during his first year. We talked about his work, his apartment, his hopes and dreams. He came home once a month, and we would sit on the porch drinking sweet tea like we did when he was little. I felt like the luckiest mother in the world. By my early 50s, life had finally settled into something peaceful. I had worked my way up to branch manager at the bank. The mortgage was paid off. The house was mine, free and clear. I had a modest retirement account growing slowly but steadily. I started thinking about retiring early, maybe at 60, so I could enjoy my remaining years. I imagined spending time with grandchildren someday, teaching them to bake cookies, taking them to the park. I had no idea that a storm was already forming on the horizon, and it was coming from the person I trusted most in this world. 3 years before the incident in the car, Brandon called me with exciting news. Mom, I met someone. His voice was different, lighter, happier. I could hear the smile through the phone. Her name was Stacy. They worked at the same company but in different departments. She was in human resources, he said, which meant she was smart and good with people. He wanted me to meet her. I was thrilled. My son was almost 27 years old, and while he had dated casually, he had never sounded this serious about anyone. I immediately started planning. Maybe I could drive to Nashville. Maybe they could come to Knoxville. I suggested we meet somewhere in between. We settled on a restaurant in Cookeville, about halfway, for both of us. I arrived early, as I always do. I wore my best blouse and the pearl earrings Harold had given me on our 5th anniversary. I wanted to make a good impression. When they walked in, I noticed her before I noticed my own son. Stacy was striking. She had wavy brown hair that fell past her shoulders, green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and a smile that was almost too perfect. She wore a designer dress and carried a handbag that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Diamonds sparkled on her ears and around her wrist. Brandon looked at her like she hung the moon. They slid into the booth across from me, and Stacy immediately reached out to take my hands. Mrs. Dolly, it is so wonderful to finally meet you. Brandon has told me so much about you, raising him all by yourself after losing your husband. You are such an inspiration. Her words were warm, her tone sincere. I felt myself relaxing. Over dinner, she told me about her background. She grew up in foster care, she said, bouncing from home to home until she aged out of the system. She put herself through college on scholarships and determination. She had no family to speak of, no parents or siblings to lean on. My heart went out to her. Here was a woman who had overcome so much, just like me. I thought we were kindred spirits. That was my first mistake. 6 months later, Brandon proposed. I was happy for him, though a small part of me thought it was moving fast. But who was I to judge Harold? And I had gotten engaged after only 8 months of dating. Sometimes when you know, you know. The wedding was planned for spring. Stacy wanted something elegant but intimate. Just close friends and family, she said. Of course, she had no family to invite. That meant most of the guests were from my side neighbors and co-workers and distant cousins who remembered Brandon as a baby. It also meant I paid for most of the wedding. Brandon asked, hesitantly, almost embarrassed. Stacy's sitting right here, Mom, and we hate to ask, but we are trying to save for a house. Could you help with the wedding costs? We will pay you back. How could I say no? This was my only child's wedding. I wanted it to be beautiful for him. I wrote checks totaling $15,000. The venue, the flowers, the catering, the photographer. I told myself it was an investment in their happiness. During the planning, I noticed small things that bothered me. Stacy had very specific ideas about everything, and she did not like input from anyone else. When I suggested we use my mother's china for the reception, she smiled politely and said she had already ordered special plates. When I offered to bake the wedding cake myself, she laughed and said they needed something more professional. Brandon always took her side. Whatever Stacy wants, Mom, it is her day. I bit my tongue. All brides were particular, I told myself. It was normal. At the wedding, I sat in the front row and cried tears of joy as my son said his vows. He looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so grown up. Stacy looked like a movie star in her white gown. When they kissed, everyone cheered. I did not notice the way Stacy glanced at me during the reception, a quick look that vanished before I could read it. I did not notice how she steered Brandon away every time I tried to talk to him alone. I did not notice because I did not want to see. After the wedding, things changed gradually. Brandon used to call me every day. Then it became every other day. Then twice a week. Then once a week, if I was lucky. When we did talk, the conversations felt rushed. Stacy was always there in the background, her voice occasionally cutting in with comments or questions. Brandon would say things like, Stacy says hi, or Stacy wants to know if you have tried that new restaurant downtown. I tried to visit them in Nashville. The first time they were busy with work. The second time they had plans with friends. The third time Stacy said she was not feeling well and they needed to reschedule. After a while, I stopped asking. Thanksgiving came and Brandon said they would be spending it with Stacy's co-workers since she had no family. Christmas, they went on a trip to Colorado. His birthday, they celebrated with friends in Nashville. For the first time in 30 years, I spent the holidays alone. I told myself it was natural. He was a married man now. He had his own life, his own priorities. I could not expect him to revolve around me forever. But it hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Then the requests for money started. The first one came about a year after the wedding. Brandon called sounding stressed. Mom, I hate to ask, but Stacy's car broke down and the repair costs are insane. Could you lend us $5,000? We will pay you back as soon as we can. I transferred the money that same day. He was my son. Of course I would help. 3 months later, it was $7,000 for unexpected home repairs. Something about water damage and mold remediation. 6 months after that, $10,000 for a business investment. Brandon said they were starting a small side business, some kind of online consulting thing. He was excited about it. He said it could change their lives. I had my doubts, but I trusted him. I had always trusted him. In total, over 2 years, I gave them $25,000. Not once did they pay back a single cent. Every time I gently brought it up, Brandon had an excuse. Things are tight right now, Mom. The business is taking longer to get off the ground than we expected. Soon, I promise. I stopped asking eventually. I did not want to seem greedy or unsupportive. I did not want to push my son further away than he already was. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern. I should have recognized the manipulation. But love makes us blind. And my love for Brandon had been blinding me for 30 years. Brandon's 30th birthday was approaching. It felt like a milestone, not just for him, but for me too. 3 decades since I held that tiny baby in my arms. 3 decades of loving him more than anything else in this world. I wanted to do something special, something that would remind him how much I cared, something that might bring us closer again. I remembered a conversation from years ago. Brandon had been flipping through a magazine and stopped on an advertisement for watches. He pointed at an Omega Seamaster and said, "Someday, when I make it big, I'm going to buy myself one of these." It was a small moment easily forgotten. But mothers remember everything. I found the same watch at a jeweler in Knoxville. The price tag made me dizzy. Nearly $4,000. That was almost my entire emergency fund, the money I had been saving in case the roof needed repairs or the car broke down. I bought it anyway. I thought about mailing it with a card, but that felt impersonal. I thought about asking Brandon to visit, but I knew Stacy would find some reason to cancel. So I came up with a different plan. I would drive to Nashville and surprise him. I pictured his face when he saw me. The shock, then the joy. Maybe he would cry a little, like he used to when he was young and overwhelmed by emotion. Maybe this would be the moment we reconnected, the moment that erased all the distance between us. I called Brandon's office and asked the receptionist what time he usually left work. She told me he was typically out by 5:30. I did not mention I was his mother. I did not want anyone spoiling the surprise. On the morning of his birthday, I woke up before dawn. I showered, did my hair and makeup, and put on a nice outfit. I packed the watch in a beautiful box, wrapped with a silver ribbon. I also brought balloons and a birthday card I had written the night before. The card was 3 pages long, filled with memories and love and hopes for his future. The drive to Nashville took about 3 hours. I listened to old country songs on the radio, the same ones Harold and I used to sing together on road trips. I felt nervous, but excited like a teenager going on a first date. I arrived at Brandon's office building around 4 in the afternoon, early just as I planned. I parked in the visitor lot and waited, scanning the rows of cars until I spotted Brandon's black SUV. It was the same one I had helped him buy 2 years ago, giving him the down payment as a wedding gift. I sat there for a while, watching employees trickle out of the building. None of them were Brandon. Then an idea struck me. What if I hid in his car? When he got in, I would pop up from the back seat and shout surprise. It was silly, maybe even a little childish, but it felt perfect. Just like the surprises I used to plan for his birthday parties when he was little. I walked over to his SUV, heart racing with anticipation. The door was unlocked. Brandon had always been careless about that, even when I warned him. I opened the back door, climbed in, and lay down on the floor behind the front seats. The space was cramped, but I managed to curl up with my gift box pressed against my chest. I waited. The minutes stretched on. The leather seats smelled like Stacy's perfume, something expensive and floral. I thought about how Brandon's car used to smell like fast food and gym bags when he was in college, how things had changed. About 40 minutes later, I heard footsteps approaching. My heart started pounding. I prepared to spring up to see the look on my son's face. The driver's door opened. Brandon slid in behind the wheel. I heard him sigh the way he always did after a long day. Then the passenger door opened. Someone else got in. I froze. I had not expected this. Maybe it was a co-worker he was giving a ride to. I decided to wait to see what happened. I could surprise him at home instead. But then I heard Stacy's voice, and I decided to stay hidden just a little longer. "Did you talk to her yet?" Stacy asked. "Not yet," Brandon replied. "She keeps calling, but I have been avoiding her." I held my breath. Were they talking about me? "You need to push harder," Stacy said. "We are running out of time." I know. The business deal needs the money by end of month." A cold feeling spread through my chest. What money? What business deal? Then Stacy said the words that changed everything. "Your pathetic mother will not be a problem much longer." I lay there in the darkness of that back seat, unable to breathe, unable to move. The word echoed in my head. Pathetic. My own daughter-in-law had called me pathetic. But that was only the beginning. "Once she signs the house over to you," Stacy continued, "we sell it and disappear." Brandon was quiet for a moment. "She will never agree to that." "Then make her." Stacy's voice was sharp, impatient. "Tell her you are in debt. Tell her you will lose everything. She always falls for your sob stories." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I forced them back. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand exactly what they were planning. I feel bad sometimes, Brandon said. She gave me everything, and now it is time to take the rest. That old woman has been alone too long anyway. A nursing home will be good for her. A nursing home. They wanted to put me in a nursing home. My mind raced through the past 2 years. The requests for money, the excuses, the distance. It had all been part of a plan. They had been softening me up, testing how much I would give, preparing me for the final blow. Stacy started talking about the details. She had a friend in real estate who could rush the paperwork. Once I signed the house over to Brandon, they could close the sale within 2 weeks. The house was worth at least $200,000, maybe more with the current market. And the money I gave them for the business investment, that was gone. Spent on vacations and clothes and nights out. There was no business. There never had been. What if she wants to live with us? Brandon asked. Stacy laughed. A cold, cruel laugh that made my skin crawl. Are you kidding? I am not taking care of some old woman. Shady Pines nursing home is already on my list. They take anyone with Medicare. Shady Pines. I knew that place. Everyone in Tennessee knew that place. It had been investigated twice for neglect. Residents left in dirty beds, staff that did not care. People went there to be forgotten. That was where they wanted to send me. She will never go willingly, Brandon said. Then we tell her it is temporary, just until we get back on our feet. By the time she realizes what is happening, we will be in Florida with new identities. New identities. They were planning to disappear, to take everything I owned, dump me in a hellhole, and vanish. Brandon spoke again. Do you think she suspects anything, please? Stacy's voice dripped with contempt. She is too desperate for your love to see anything. Every time you call, she cries with happiness. It is pathetic. There was that word again. Pathetic. Like I was some sad, stupid woman who did not know any better. True, Brandon said. And then he laughed. He actually laughed. She even paid for our honeymoon thinking it was for her. I remembered that check. $2,000, supposed to help them start their new life together. I had been so happy to give it. And the best part, Stacy added, she has no one else. No friends checking on her, no family. Who will even notice when she is gone? Silence in the car. I could hear my own heartbeat loud and fast in my ears. Who would notice? No one. That was the truth. I had pushed everyone away to focus on Brandon. Mrs. Patterson had passed years ago. My co-workers at the bank were friendly but distant. My extended family lived far away, and we rarely spoke. I was alone, and they knew it. The tears came then, silent and hot, running sideways into my ears as I lay on that car floor. 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of love, and this was what I got in return. But somewhere beneath the pain, something else started to stir. Something harder and colder. Not despair, determination. I had raised this boy by myself through poverty and grief. I had survived losing my husband, survived the loneliness, survived working 2 jobs until my body ached. I was not some helpless old woman they could manipulate and discard. They thought I was pathetic. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I needed to get out of this car without being discovered. I needed evidence. I needed a plan. And suddenly I remembered. When I got into the car, I had pulled out my phone to record the surprise. I was going to film Brandon's reaction. The phone was still in my hand, still recording. I had everything. Brandon and Stacy got out of the car about 10 minutes later. They walked toward an apartment building, probably to visit someone. I did not care where they were going. I only cared that they were gone. I waited until they disappeared through the entrance. Then I slowly sat up. My body was stiff from lying in that cramped position. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I checked my phone. The recording was over an hour long. I had captured everything. Every word about their scheme, every cruel joke at my expense, every detail of their plan to steal my home and abandon me. I climbed out of the car, my legs unsteady beneath me. The gift box was still in my arms. That $4,000 watch I had bought with such love for a son who wanted to throw me away. I drove back to Knoxville that night. 3 hours on dark highways, replaying their conversation in my head. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was starting to rise. I had not slept, but I was not tired. Adrenaline kept me going. The first thing I did was make a copy of the recording. I saved it to my computer, to a flash drive, and to an email I sent to myself. I was not going to let this evidence disappear. Then I called in sick to work. For the first time in 30 years, I used a personal day. I had more important things to do. At 9 in the morning, I walked into the law office of Linda Patterson. Not the same Mrs. Patterson, who had watched Brandon as a child, but her granddaughter. Linda was a lawyer now, specializing in real estate and family law. She had built a reputation for helping people in difficult situations. I sat in her office and told her everything. Then I played the recording. Linda listened with a face of stone. When it was over, she shook her head slowly. Mrs. Dolly, this is financial elder abuse. It is a crime in Tennessee. With this evidence, you could press charges. I asked her what my options were. She explained that we could go to the police immediately. Brandon and Stacy could be arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit fraud. They could face prison time. But that was not what I wanted. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, a part of me still could not bear the thought of seeing my son in handcuffs. Stupid maybe, weak perhaps, but he was still my child. Linda understood. She suggested another approach. First, we would protect my assets. She helped me create a trust that would hold the house. The trust required a third-party signature for any sale. Brandon could not take it even if I signed something under duress. Second, we would change my will. I had left everything to Brandon. Now I left everything to charity. A children's hospital in Nashville. A scholarship fund for foster kids. Organizations that would actually do good with the money. Third, we would freeze any joint accounts or financial connections. I had added Brandon to my savings account years ago just in case something happened to me. That access was now revoked. Finally, Linda suggested I confront them directly. With her present, and with a detective from the local police department who handled elder abuse cases. I agreed. 1 week later, I called Brandon. I kept my voice light, casual, as if nothing was wrong. Honey, I have some papers I need you to sign. Insurance stuff, nothing exciting. Could you come by this weekend? He sounded surprised, but agreed. Stacy would come too, of course. She never let him out of her sight when there was money involved. They arrived on Saturday afternoon. I watched through the window as they got out of the car, saw Brandon carrying a bouquet of cheap flowers. Probably stopped at a gas station on the way. A last-minute attempt to butter me up before asking for more. They walked through the front door and stopped cold. Linda Patterson sat in my living room, a folder of documents on the coffee table in front of her. Next to her was Detective Morrison, a serious woman in her 50s with a badge on her belt. What is this? Brandon asked. His face was pale. Sit down, I said. We need to talk. They sat. They had no choice. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The recording filled the room. Stacy's voice calling me pathetic. Brandon laughing about the money I gave them. Their plans for my house, for the nursing home, for their escape to Florida. When it was over, no one spoke for a long moment. Brandon's eyes were wet. Mom, I can explain. No, I said. You cannot. Stacy tried a different approach. That recording is fake. You doctored it. This is entrapment. Detective Morrison spoke for the first time. Voice recordings are admissible in Tennessee, Mrs. Stacy. And what I just heard describes conspiracy to commit fraud, financial exploitation of an elderly person, and theft by deception. Those are felonies. Stacy's face went white. Linda explained the situation. I had evidence to destroy them. I could press charges that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Brandon would lose his career, his reputation, everything he had built. Stacy would face even worse, given that she seemed to be the mastermind. But I was offering them a choice. They would sign documents, returning all rights to my property. They would repay the $25,000 they had borrowed in full within 6 months. They would have no claim to my estate now or ever, and they would agree to no contact with me for 5 years. If they violated any of these terms, the recording would go straight to the police. Brandon started crying. Real tears, not the fake kind he used to get what he wanted. Mom, please, I'm so sorry. Stacy made me. She said, "We needed the money. I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at my son, my only child, the baby I had held through colic and fevers, the boy I had driven to soccer practice and helped with homework, the man I had sacrificed everything for. "You are my son," I said, "and I loved you with everything I had. But you are not my son anymore." Stacy stood up, her face twisted with rage. "This is ridiculous. You cannot do this. We will fight this in court." Detective Morrison stood up too. "You are welcome to try," she said. "But I should warn you that I have already started a file on this case. Any judge in this state will be very interested to hear that recording." Stacy sat back down. They signed the papers. Every single one. Brandon's hand was shaking so badly he could hardly hold the pen. Stacy signed with angry jabbing strokes like she was stabbing the paper. When it was done, they left. Brandon looked back at me once, his face streaked with tears. I closed the door before he could say anything else. It was over. The days after they left were the hardest of my life. I sat in my empty house surrounded by 30 years of memories. Brandon's baby pictures on the mantel, his high school diploma framed in the hallway, the growth chart I had marked on the doorframe of his bedroom tracking his height from age 3 to 18. How had it come to this? I could not eat, could not sleep. I replayed every moment of his childhood, searching for signs I had missed. Was there something I could have done differently? Had I loved him too much? Not enough? Had I spoiled him by sacrificing everything? The questions circled endlessly like vultures over carrion. I stopped answering my phone, stopped checking email. When the bank called to ask when I was coming back to work, I said I needed more time. I did not know how much. I thought about calling Brandon. Dozens of times I picked up the phone, started to dial, then stopped. What would I even say? The bridge between us had not just been burned. It had been demolished, every stone pulverized to dust. About 3 weeks into my isolation, someone knocked on my door. I almost did not answer. But the knocking continued, patient and persistent. I opened the door to find a woman about my age standing on the porch. Silver hair, kind eyes, a hesitant smile. "Dolly, I do not know if you remember me. I am Margaret, Margaret Sullivan. We went to high school together." The name brought back a flood of memories. Margaret had sat next to me in English class. We passed notes back and forth, giggling at inside jokes. She had been at my wedding, at Brandon's baptism. Then life got busy and we drifted apart the way people do. "How did you know?" I started. "Your neighbor called me," Margaret said. "Mrs. Hendricks. She said you had not left the house in weeks and she was worried. She found me through one of those reunion websites." I stood there not knowing what to say. Then Margaret stepped forward and hugged me, and I fell apart in her arms. We talked for hours that day. I told her everything. The betrayal, the recording, the confrontation. She listened without judgment, without interrupting. When I was done, she took my hands in hers. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think you have spent 30 years living for someone else. And now it is time to start living for yourself." I did not know what that meant. Living for myself. It was a foreign concept, like speaking a language I had never learned. But Margaret was patient. She came back the next day and the day after that. She coaxed me out of the house for short walks around the block. She brought groceries and cooked dinner in my kitchen. She sat with me when I cried and made me laugh with stories from our school days. She had been through her own struggles, she told me. 2 divorces, children who lived across the country and rarely called, a battle with breast cancer that had taught her the value of every single day. "Life does not always go the way we plan," she said. "But we do not stop living because of it." Slowly, I started to believe her. I went back to work. My co-workers welcomed me with genuine warmth. I had always kept them at arm's length, focused entirely on Brandon and my responsibilities. Now I let myself actually connect with them. Coffee breaks became conversations. Conversations became friendships. I also took Margaret's advice and tried new things. I signed up for a yoga class at the community center. The first session, I could barely touch my toes. But the instructor was encouraging, and the other women in the class were around my age, dealing with their own aches and limitations. We laughed at ourselves together. I volunteered at the local library helping children with their reading. There was something healing about being around young people who looked at books with wonder and excitement. It reminded me of Brandon at that age, but the memory no longer stabbed quite as sharply. I even started painting. I had always wanted to try it but never had the time. Now I had nothing but time. My first attempts were terrible, but that was not the point. The point was the doing, the creating, the feeling of colors spreading across canvas. 4 months after the confrontation, I made a decision. I was going to sell the house on Maple Street, not because Brandon had forced me to, but because I wanted to. The house was too big, too full of ghosts. Every room held memories I was not ready to face. I needed a fresh start, a new space that belonged only to me. I found an apartment in a complex for active seniors. It was smaller, but bright with big windows that let in the morning sun. My neighbors were people like me, people starting over in the second half of their lives. Gloria lived downstairs. She was 70 years old, widowed twice, with a laugh that could fill an entire room. Pete and Ruth lived across the hall, a retired couple who spent half the year traveling in their RV. They adopted me into their friend group immediately. For the first time since Harold died, I had a community. Not family by blood, but family by choice. People who showed up because they wanted to, not because they expected something in return. I started traveling too. Just small trips at first. A weekend in Gatlinburg to see the mountains. A week in Charleston to walk the historic streets. Then bigger adventures. The Grand Canyon, which made me feel tiny and infinite at the same time. San Francisco, where I rode a cable car and ate sourdough bread by the bay. Eventually, I went to Paris. I had always dreamed of seeing the Eiffel Tower. Harold and I used to talk about going there someday. Someday never came for us. But I went alone, and I stood beneath that iron giant and I cried, not from sadness, from the overwhelming joy of being alive. Life had not turned out the way I planned, but it had turned out, and that was enough. 2 years have passed since that day in Brandon's car. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Stacy divorced. Apparently, once there was no more money to chase, their relationship fell apart. Stacy left him for someone else, someone with deeper pockets. Brandon lost his job shortly after, something about financial irregularities that finally caught up with him. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a retail store, living in a small apartment on the wrong side of town. People have told me he tried to reach out. Letters arrived at my old address forwarded by the new owners. Emails appeared in my inbox, long paragraphs of apology and regret. I never read them. I never responded. It is not about holding a grudge. I have let go of the anger, truly I have. Holding on to bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I learned that in therapy, which I started about 6 months after everything happened. Best decision I ever made. I do not hate Brandon, but I also do not need him in my life anymore. The door between us is closed, and I have no interest in opening it again. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me wise. At 56 years old, I have stopped caring about what others think. What I have learned from all of this is something I wish I had understood decades ago. Loving someone does not mean giving them everything you have. It does not mean sacrificing your own needs, your own dignity, your own self. Real love includes boundaries. Real love respects the giver as much as the receiver. I gave Brandon everything because I thought that was what good mothers did. I never taught him to work for things, to value what he had to understand, that love cannot be measured in dollars and cents. In trying to protect him from the hardships I faced, I created someone who expected the world to hand him whatever he wanted. That was my mistake, one of many. But here is the other thing I learned. It is never too late to start over. At 56, I have more friends than I did at 36. I have hobbies that bring me joy, a home that feels like mine, and a peace of mind I never knew was possible. I wake up each morning grateful for another day. I go to bed each night satisfied with how I spent it. I am not pathetic. I was never pathetic. I was a woman who loved too much and expected too little. Now I know better. To anyone watching this who has been betrayed by someone you trusted, who has given everything only to be discarded, who feels alone and broken and without hope, I want you to know something. You are stronger than you think. You have survived things that would have destroyed others. And you have so much life left to live. Do not let anyone make you feel small. Do not let their cruelty define your worth. You are not what they did to you. You are what you do next. That day, hiding in the back seat of my son's car, I thought I was giving him a surprise. But life surprised me instead. I lost a son, but I found myself. And in the end, that may have been the greatest gift of all. So here is my question for you. Have you ever discovered something about someone you loved that changed everything? Have you ever had to choose between holding on and letting go? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button so others can find it too. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story. And share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you are going through, I wish you strength, I wish you peace, and I wish you the courage to believe that your best days are still ahead. Sometimes the greatest gift is not what we give to others. It is what we finally allow ourselves to receive. Freedom, dignity, and a second chance at life. At